So this little tutorial is all about jersey neckbands. They can be a little bit tricky, but we're going to take you through today how to pop them into place with no little gathers or puckers or any little wrinkles or lumps. So for nice smooth jersey neckbands, enjoy the tutorial that's coming up. We've now got to the point in the project where it's make or break on the neckline. It's always that part, especially when sewing with jersey, that can either give you that beautiful smooth flat finish round the neckline, or it can be a total nightmare. A lot of people are a bit concerned about sewing with jersey for that very reason, that the necklines can be a little bit fiddly. What I'm doing today is I'm going to take you through exactly how to get that perfectly flat neckline all the way round. For this top, we're using a pattern that we've cut ourselves, but even if you're using a commercial pattern, you might well want to do this method to double check the neckline that they have given you, the neckband that they have given you, because quite often they don't take into account the range of different weights, weaves and styles of jersey and mixes of jersey that you can get hold of these days. And if you're sewing with a very light jersey like we're here today, it's going to require a different size pattern piece than if you're sewing with a firm cotton jersey that's got a very fine weave. So this is a method that you can use whenever you are trying to put a neckband into any kind of jersey garment. So the very first thing we're going to do is, once the rest of the garment is nicely together, you're going to want to take your tape measure and measure round your neckline. Stand the tape measure up so it's nice and easy to follow right along the edge all the way round the neckline. If your neckline is slightly different from front to back, measure round the front first and then measure round the back afterwards. Add those two together and that'll give you the total circumference of your neckline. Once you've measured that up, you want to take away 5 centimetres from that length, and that's going to be the length of neckband that you want. Now, we've been talking about bands a lot, and what I'm going to do is also show you through how to make a little pattern for your band. Now, when you have a neckband, you have a folded piece of fabric. The required width of your neckband, so how deep you want it to appear on your garment, you take that, and for this particular one, I'm going to use 1 centimetre. So I'd like a neckband that turns out as 1 centimetre. So I need double that, so it can be folded in half. And then what I also want to either side is 1.5 centimetres seam allowance. So we're working with that same seam allowance we have all the way through the garment. So when you're drawing out your pattern piece, you can add your 2 times your band width together. Then you add your seam allowances to each side, and that will create the width of pattern piece you require. The length is then your neckline measured up and minus 5 centimetres to create that neckband. Right, my neckband has been cut to the right size and I have joined it so that I've got a full circle of neckband to use. What I'm going to do first is, where I've joined it, that's going to be my centre back. So I'll fold it in half, right sides outwards, and I'll first pop a pin into the centre back there. From there, it's then quite easy to find the centre front over on the other side. Now, jersey can be a little bit fiddly to make sure it stays nice and folded, but as you go along, the more pins that go into this, the better it will sit, ready for putting onto your top. So I've got the other side there, so I'll place a pin over on the other side. With those 2 pins, I can now turn the neckband the other way so that the 2 pins lay one on top of the other, and that will let me know where the quarters are. So I'll end up with 4 pins in my neckband showing me the front, centre back and the quarters. What I'm also going to do is do the same for the neckline. So at either side, we'll have the sides pinned. Now this neckline is exactly the same front and back. If your front is lower than your back, your quarters normally sit a few centimetres below the shoulder seams if you have shoulder seams in the top. So I'm going to find the centre front and the centre back and the quarters. And because this neckline is quite a long one that I'm creating on this particular top, I'm going to pop a pin halfway between all of those as well. So I've actually divided the neckline and the neck band into 8ths before I start to pin them together. So I'll just make sure I've got a pin in between each of the quarter pins on my neckline, and then I'll do exactly the same for my neckband. Now I'm doing this by eye. You can measure it if you wish, and that's all 8ths now marked up. So what I'm then going to do, I've got 8ths of my neckband all pinned, and I've got 8ths of my neckline all pinned as well. What I'll then do is I will begin to bring the two together. So the pin that's on the seam of our neckband, where it's joined together, that's going to be our centre back. And I'm going to place that at the centre back. I want the raw edges all lining up together. So there should be just a little bit more fabric on the neckline than there is in the neckband. So each time you move from one pin to the next, you should, when you're sewing it, need to stretch the neckband just a little to reach to the next pin. Now the very important thing when you're sewing this is to make sure you do stretch away all of that stretch between each pin. Don't let it follow on to the next pin and then to the next pin and the next pin, because you will end up with a wrinkle at the back of your neckline where you haven't quite got enough fabric to get all the way round. So that's all pinned into place, and what we want to do now is bring it together with the sewing machine or overlocker, whichever you're using. Remember your 1.5 seam allowance, but what's also very important is that you make sure the fold on the outside of the band, which will eventually turn in to become your neckline, is always the same distance away from the presser foot, whether it's overlocker or sewing machine. If that distance is nice and uniform all the way round, when your band is pressed upwards, it will look nice and uniform all the way round that neckline. So that's one thing to watch out for as you begin to sew. We'll get this neckband attached and then we'll almost be finished. So there's our neckband, successfully into the neckline of our jumper. We haven't got any little tucks or gathers, and it's nice and even all the way round. If you're sewing with jersey fabrics and you need to put a neckline in, the top tips from today's little tutorial are always check that pattern piece. It may not be appropriate for the jersey you're using, so do that little double check that I talked you through earlier. Always make sure you divide the neckline and the neckband into quarters and 8ths if necessary, to make sure that as you're sewing you can stretch evenly all the way round the neckband. Always keep an eye on how deep that neckband is compared to the edge of your presser foot, whether using a sewing machine or an overlocker. And once it's in place, give it a really lovely press so that it lies nice and flat on the garment. And those top tips should give you a successful neckline every time. So there we go. We've worked our way through a neckband. It's all sitting nice and flat. It's had a lovely press, and we're ready to wear the new top that we've made. So I really hope you've enjoyed this little tutorial and that those neckbands are no longer too much of a mystery for you. If you do need any help or guidance, just pop a comment below and I'll be more than happy to help. Goodbye.